I wanted to speak about the subject of charity and a couple of other things in response to a comment that I received. It was a very nice comment, actually, mainly supportive, but the gentleman was correcting me on the matter of charity, my approach to the Ukraine, and women. So I suppose I'd like to address all those uh, subjects, but it might take more than one video. I don't want to make these things too long. It's tedious to watch them. The the concept of charity, I believe, is enshrined in 1 Corinthians 13. And I think in modern times it's been misconstrued because where I live, there are charity shops everywhere, and people think that charity is helping other people. That would be charity in the modern conception of the term, and it might also refer to alms. But in Corinthians, really, I don't think charity it means that. What charity means is being charitable in your consideration of others. So treating your neighbours with charity is to always find the best possible opinion in your heart that you can of anything that might be perceived as a shortcoming or whatever they do. It's a charitable outlook, you see. This is the heart of charity, really. It's the essence of love thy neighbour. Um, you have to be charitable, and of course, it also includes alms. There is, we are instructed in the Bible to cast our bread upon the waters, and to not withhold our hand if we see our brother in need. But it has to be practiced carefully. In the truth community, for example, they value the idea of charity and they try to help one another out. This is quite a common theme. And so people who've got enough money to buy me out 3 times have their houses cleaned for them by charitable helpers, or miscreants are accompanied into the law court by people who believe in common law practices and they do it for free, or there might be a solicitor doing it, or somebody like Piers Corbyn, who I met, who is the brother of the leader, of the once leader of the opposition. He would get involved in legal cases to uphold principles that had become established within the truth community. It might have been opposition to vaccine mandates or whatever, I don't know. But those sorts of themes, which are generally right, I don't think they're wrong. And so he would, do those things, I think, often with no cost. He'd just do them out of a charitable gesture. And so charity in that sense was valued highly, and everybody was expected to be charitable. But it was just theatre, really, a backslapping party. The attitude to people who were not within the truth community, especially officers of the state, or people who embraced ideas that were in opposition to theirs, the consideration of those people was not at all charitable. There was quite a lot of hatred towards the authorities and really the publicans they would have been in the Bible, just doing the will of the state. And I know those people can be annoying, but again, it doesn't absolve us from love thy neighbour and our requirement to be charitable towards them in all cases and to accept their fines, gracefully, as far as we can, especially if we've contravened some bylaw. We wouldn't want to do that. I mean, we are instructed to be um, to honour the king, I suppose, really, in England. I know that these rules don't, well, people might think they don't come from the king, but I think we, as far as we are able and as far as we can do so without um, uh, breaking any scriptural precepts, I don't think, if there had been a vaccine mandate, I would have resisted that, of course. And I think most thinkers would have done so, because it would have been a travesty, and it would have involved submission to a power to which I cannot kneel, before which I cannot kneel, and I don't think any Christian can and should. Of course, a lot of Christians did proceed to follow the mandate. They had been convinced in their hearts that it was the right thing to do, and I think they were greatly deceived. But again, they are my neighbours, and I have to, I have to have a charitable consideration as far as it is in my heart to do so, and the more the better, really. I do sometimes feel a bit uncharitable towards people who preach false biblical ideas in churches. I have more of a problem with them, because they're just so hard of hearing. But they're still my neighbours. I wouldn't cause them any harm or grief, um, as far as it can be avoided. Now, in the church that I attended, charity was really, I think I could probably make a case by relating a story. One of the preachers in that church related to the whole assembly, I think not during the service, how a beggar had approached him, and he'd given him £1, and the beggar had asked him if he could not give him some more, and the preacher, or whoever was speaking, was saying that was making a joke out of it, and he was quite outraged that I've already given you £1. What do you want from me now? Was the attitude that he was being put upon. But that same man would have probably put in the collection box that came around, or it was a little bag with a wooden handle, an odd sort of thing. And he would have put, I don't know how much, but I'm sure around about £50 at least every Sunday when that came around. Possibly 100 if he was considering the tithing. He was actually quite a wealthy man, this fellow, and his wife was in a well-paid job, and he lived in very poor accommodation. He was very frugal in his affairs, so he had plenty of coin, you see. Then the money in the collection box, which we all contributed to. I mean, I didn't give that much. I did for a short while, actually, when I was trying to be, trying to align myself with the principles, and I started putting, I think, £30 in. Well, I also got baptized, so I put a lot of money in when I was baptized. But funnily enough, when they showed me the books, because by that time I'd become a trusted member of the community, I was not to be cast out until shortly after. Or I really cast myself out, I think. I just left the keys and hung them up, and that was the first time that I left the church. And so I was no longer given access to the financial records. And the money that I'd put in the purse didn't appear in the accounts at all. So I don't know what happened to that money and why it shouldn't appear, and I never really dared to ask. Um, my contribution would have probably doubled the collection on that Sunday, but it didn't appear in as income anywhere. I don't know, but the money that they collected, they would send off to two main organisations. One was the Trinitarian Bible Society, which is in London, and they print King James Bibles in different languages. And I went to visit these gentlemen, and well, it's just, how can I say it? They were very well attired men and women, were well spoken, extremely polite, and I would say, highly educated, most of them. And they showed us, the idea was that they would show us around the print works, and then we would buy some trinkets and Bibles or something. I mean, really, it was a sales exercise, the way that any company would do and invite potential clients. That's what it was. It was posing as some kind of religious thing, I suppose, but it didn't. They're just selling books, and they were, I mean, I'm sure they must have been very nice and all the rest of it. I had a few on my cross-gender radar, but always in those events you'll find that, and in churches also, once you begin to know what to look for. And then they'd give it to the Christian Institute, which is a lobby group, bringing cases before Parliament and all the rest of it. And this was in conflict with their stated principles, and I pointed that out, but nothing was done. Their stated principles being that it was not the job of the church to interfere with the affairs of the state. Which is, I don't know, debatable, shall we say, at least. So that was charity from their perspective, you see. But, if somebody's sleeping on the street and is asking you for some money, you could give him nothing. Of course, it depends how you're feeling, or what, you have to assess the situation case by case. There are chancers really that are sort of swindling people in a way, and then keeping expensive cars hidden behind the shops. It's a strange world, and so you have to have a little bit of street smarts. But I mean, if somebody's sleeping down on the streets in some dirty blankets or something like that, they probably could use a bit more than £1, couldn't they? I mean, if you give somebody like that 30 or 40 quid, you're already making a difference in their life. And, you can give them a blessing, and I'm sure they'll give you a blessing back. I'm not saying it's a requirement, but to moan about being asked to give more than £1 to me just seems to be such a mean-spirited outlook. And to do it in the church also, imagine that. So, I do agree with charity, I suppose, but I don't define it the way that the church seems to define it. And the idea of giving money to the Ukraine, I'll just use the Ukraine as an example. I mean, you can't give money to the Ukraine. How do you do it? The Ukraine is a country with apparently some kind of conflict of power in progress. I have to be careful how I speak here, because I don't want YouTube to censor me or to have to remove me. I mean, I am a conspiracy theorist. That's just how it goes. So people have to, do their own due diligence. But I'm very skeptical of the reality of war. I've become very skeptical of it by the images that we are shown on television in all circumstances. This is something that I started to look at. It surprised me at first. I hadn't considered it, and I started to look at it back at the time of the 7/7, or shortly after the 7/7 bombings. And I was quite, let's say I was very surprised and shocked by the things that I began to learn. And my subsequent research seemed to confirm them. I don't know, I don't know the truth of these things, but our enemy is very, very subtle indeed. And the Bible speaks of wars and rumors of wars, you see. So what is happening in Ukraine, what it involves, and all the rest of it, I have no idea. But our rulers love using theatre, and they use their theatre also to cast spells, because they're involved in a form of witchcraft. This is what I believe. Now, I can't prove a word of this. And I don't want to sort of cross any boundaries here, because of course I could be completely wrong, and it could be that everything is precisely as it is shown to us. But these are ideas that I haven't made up myself, as it were. I've just assembled them over the years, mainly by listening to YouTube videos, some of which have been rapidly removed when the matter was sensitive. I don't want to speak of any particular incident, I mean, we all know that there's the very famous ones, of course, like 9/11, which has brought a great deal of skepticism across the world, really, I think. And a lot of it can be viewed, I think, fairly openly on YouTube. There's so many different stories. This is how it's practiced, really, with just a succession of different explanations. And after a while, whether it's the Kennedy shooting or anything like that, there's so many different stories that are woven in. As Churchill said, the truth is protected by a bodyguard of lies. There are many different lies that surround these events. I was looking at something which I think is a similar thing recently. A fellow was apparently driving down the motorway in this country. I think this is quite recent, in a powerful electric vehicle, a Jaguar, and the vehicle took over and went into runaway mode, and he had called the police, and the police said he was travelling at speeds of up to 120 miles an hour. In this country, the limit is 70. 120 miles an hour is really fast, of course. And the police were having difficulty keeping up. They were driving BMWs of a certain model, but probably not the quickest ones. And they eventually sandwiched him between two police cars and drove so that he was continually slightly ramming the police car in front. This is the story as it was told. And they were only able to bring him to a stop after about 40 or 50 miles. And that was only when the electrical charge of the vehicle was completely depleted, because their vehicles were not strong enough to stop his heavier EV at speeds like that. Now, that was the story. And then the same thing happened to him again, apparently. That was the second time it had happened to the same person, and shortly thereafter he was arrested. And I don't know what the outcome is. I think this is an ongoing case, and perhaps the gentleman is still under arrest. And that sort of narrative, when you start to look at it, with a certain skepticism, shall we say, or rationally. Um, I mean, he managed to negotiate a roundabout apparently at a certain point at the end of the motorway. You know, you can't negotiate a roundabout at 120 miles an hour. Your car will just fly into the air the minute you try to steer. So it's just full of holes, the whole story, you see. And the only way that that really could be fabricated, um, people are saying that, oh, he was just speeding and he got caught by a speed camera, so he made the whole thing up on the spot twice and risked life and limb of himself and everybody else to pull off this ruse. But another explanation is that the whole thing is just a theatrical event that's been organised. Um, and then people will think, oh yes, it's the electric vehicles that are threatening the oil companies or something, and there's some massive conspiracy as to who's behind it, and Elon Musk and the evils of the what's it called, the Klaus Schwab and his merry men, pushing this agenda of zero carbon zero and all the rest of that stuff. But you see, ultimately, what I see happening on so many YouTube channels is all it is trying to create two groups of people that disagree with one another, and then setting them against one another, as it were. And this can be done using theatre also. It's like a Punch and Judy show. And I see this in the manosphere as well, where there's screaming feminist women making absolutely absurd and illogical assertions, as they do, and then having to scream at rational kind of alpha male type of guys who try to set them straight, and then somebody captures it on video. And there are channels devoted to sharing this stuff, and some of them are, they're quite amusing and quite compelling, and perhaps those events did really happen. I don't know. They might do, but it plays into the agenda, doesn't it, of creating groups that can be in conflict with one another, and it's playing against the purpose of the living God, which is to bring us all into harmony and into peaceful relations with one another. They like their. It seems to me that they like their. They're almost toying with us, and laughing at our antics. Are we going to get rid of electric cars? Should we go back to all this stuff? And I sometimes wonder, well, this plot has probably already been written, long into the future. And I wonder whether we're not just being used as to amuse them, those who control. Perhaps we are just pawns in the game, as somebody has said. God bless.